All right, week 15 just wrapped. We've got 2 Monday night games. They're not very good games. And so we won't wait on those. We will react to Packers, Seahawks, and then get in to all the juicy games, Bills, Lions, Steelers, Eagles, and more. This is what you've come to expect on First and Pod. I'm Andrew Fillipponi. My partner in crime, that's an old radio expression. I don't even know why I say that. It's very cliched. Patrick Peterson, not here. He is flying and jet setting and doing those things. So he will be back with me Thursday, and we'll set the scene for week 16 and Broncos Chargers is the Thursday night game then. So instead, right now, let's just get into these games. I start every podcast episode by saying, guys, it's really important if you like what we do, if you support a podcast where we don't just focus on 2 or 3 teams and we look at the whole entire NFL and do every game. It's really important that you subscribe. Listening's great. Listening's cool. We love word of mouth. You tell your friends that you're listening, but it's even better when you actually subscribe. That way they show right up in your feed, and you also give us good ratings and great reviews and those things, because that's how we keep the podcast going, and that's how we stay as a unit here. Myself, Pat, obviously one of the great NFL players of the last 20 years, and our intrepid producer, Spencer Ray. I don't know why I was about to call him Pat. But anyways, I got Pat on the brain, even though he's not here. Let's start with the game that I just watched, Packers and Seahawks. I was the imbecile on the podcast Thursday night who said, I bet one of these 2 teams to win the Super Bowl. And guess what? It's the team that lost by 17. I mushed the Seahawks. I destroyed any chance they had of being a relevant team this season. They've had 2 chances at home this NFL season to show people that they're a legitimate team and not just one of these teams that beats bad teams or beats average teams or mediocre teams. The Bills, that was like in early October, and then tonight, and they flunked both tests and were really non-competitive in either game. And I get it. Geno Smith suffered a knee injury here. It didn't look like it was a serious one, but bad enough where it knocked him out of this game. When I say serious, it doesn't look like it's a torn ACL or something like that. Who knows, though? I'm not one of these Dr. Chow types that from my couch can tell exactly what happened to the guy. He was running around and trying to get back into the game, and it never happened. I'm not going to tell you that if he stays in the game, they come back and win. He threw a horrible red zone interception. He has the most red zone interceptions over the last 2 years. But you obviously do see a distinct difference between what Geno Smith can do as an NFL quarterback and then when Sam Howell came into the game and basically played the entire second half, the guy that led the NFL in interceptions last year and is the reason why Washington has Jaden Daniels right now. He's not an NFL starting quarterback. And so Seattle proved fraudulent. Pat, if you were here, I would be bowing down and saying, I'm not worthy, because he very early on, I think before anybody else on major NFL platforms, said the Rams are going to find a way to rally and win the NFC West. And we'll wake up Monday morning and they will be the betting choice to win the division, even though Arizona, Pat's old team, did take care of business today against New England and stop the bleeding. It looks like the Rams are now the class of the NFC West after they started 1-4. San Francisco's dead and gone, and Seattle's going to have a chance next Sunday to get redemption at home against Minnesota. But how could I trust them? How could I believe in them based on how they've done in these kind of gut check games in Seattle? 12th man was a non-factor. You're hearing Green Bay fans go nuts. Packers paced themselves after their hot start. They had 4 possessions in the first half. They scored on all 4, including that field goal they kicked at the end of the half. The nicest thing I'll say about them offensively is the growth we've seen from Jordan Love, where he's completely eliminated and taken the interceptions out of his game. Someone that I think had been for the first half of the season, just like last year. He had just been killed by them, and it had demoralized the team, some of these interceptions. He's been a second half performer now 2 years in a row, and he was solid and steady in this game and made some ridiculous throws. That last touchdown pass to Dobbs to basically ice the game in the back of the end zone was an amazing catch, but also a daring throw by a quarterback to put it right where it needed to be, where only his wide receiver could get it. They ran the ball great early. They were not able to do it late. And their defense remains, I think, one of the more underrated and slept on units in the entire league. Cooper, the inside linebacker from Texas A&M, who's a big-time rookie, had an interception in this game of Howell. We know what McKinney has done in that regard. It's kind of a no-name defense other than McKinney, where we don't have guys. Jair Alexander, everybody knows. But it's not like they're going to have the all-pro team littered with their players. They're coached much better with Jeff Hafley, who came from Boston College this year. And they're not going to win the NFC North because Detroit's not going to, after today's loss, they're not going to fall all the way back to Green Bay. But I'll tell you what, I've run the NFL playoff machine simulator that ESPN puts out. I do it constantly. I'm more addicted to that than I ever was pornography, to be honest with you, which is a kind of self-owned, but whatever. I think there's a chance we get a Packers-Eagles wild card weekend 2-7 matchup, and it could be a 12-win team versus a 14-win team. That would be an insane game. That would be the best game by far of the wild card playoffs in a month, because I think there's a scenario where the Packers, Commanders, and Vikings all finish with the same record, and based on the simulations and scenarios out there, Green Bay would actually lose both tiebreakers and be at the 7 seed with 12 wins. So that would be an awesome game, and I think Green Bay, much like they were last year, beating Dallas, blowing them out on the road, and then what they almost did in San Francisco in the divisional round, they are more than Minnesota and more than Washington, the one team from that group that I would not want to play. So I thought they looked good last week against Detroit in a loss last Thursday. And this was a 17-point win in a place where people say it's very difficult to win in that Seattle, although it hasn't been as true this year because the New York Giants went there and won earlier in the season. Okay, let's get to the biggest games here, starting with the huge game in Detroit played between the Bills and Lions. 48-42 was the score. I think the Bills are the first team since the merger to score for 40 and give up 40 in back-to-back games. Scored 40 or more, gave up 40 or more in back-to-back games. The Rams game on Sunday, and then this game tonight. And the question I have on this one is, in this 90-point shootout, what's my biggest takeaway? The Bills winning this game, what's the biggest one? The first thing I actually want to say is not to overreact to it. And I know that seems kind of, we're in a medium here where I always want to be hyperbolic about things, and I always want to react to what I just watched. But in the back of my mind with this game, I keep thinking about the Christmas night game when it was still First and Pod with Danny Parkins and me. And Danny and I came on Christmas night to talk about the Ravens and 49ers having played last year's game of the year, and Baltimore dominated. And what happened in that game was Lamar Jackson grabbed the MVP torch from Brock Purdy. He won the MVP. Baltimore looked like they were the best team in the league. They were leading in every defensive category, and Lamar Jackson had just played his best game against the NFC's best team. And the Ravens looked like they were on a collision course for the Super Bowl. They were going to get the number 1 seed. Well, the same thing looks true for Buffalo. We saw what happened with Patrick Mahomes today. To have this unreal run of offensive football where they have scored 30 or more points in 8 straight games, they look like the best team in the NFL. I mean, that's really, I don't think, Philadelphia, I think, is the one team that would probably raise their hand right now and say, what about me? But they just stopped an 11-game winning streak, and they didn't just so I think the easy thing to do here is say Josh Allen proved that he was the NFL MVP in this game. That's what everyone is going to say about this game on Monday. And I'm not trying to be pedantic here, trying to be difficult and not saying that. But I just think it's the easiest thing. It's the lowest hanging fruit to say, what's the biggest takeaway? Josh Allen is going to win the MVP. I was actually more impressed in a game where the Bills gave up 42 points by the way they started the game defensively. Detroit got the ball. They went 3 and out. The Bills came down and scored. Detroit got the ball again. They stopped them again. The Bills came down and scored. It was 14-0. Right then and there, Detroit got taken out of. Dan Campbell can say all he wants about how he's true to his identity, he is this guy that like always has an ultra belief in his team, and they're going to always stick with their main fundamentals and principles and values and stuff. The Bills getting up on them big completely took away the run game from Detroit here. And because Buffalo stopped it early, they never got back to it. Jared Goff threw the ball 59 times in this game. Almost 60 times. He threw for 500 yards. He threw 5 touchdowns. And that's all fine and dandy, but there was zilch. Jahmyr Gibbs had 31 yards in this game. And David Montgomery got stopped those first couple series, and that was it. They turned the Lions into a one-dimensional team. Based on how bad Buffalo's been against the run this year, we've talked about this on the podcast, where they're giving up 5 yards to carry, and how good the Lions' offensive line is. This wasn't supposed to happen. Kyren Williams just went for over 100 last week at the Rams. The Rams couldn't stop LA, as it turns out. That ends up being one of the best game plans and executions of a game plan maybe all year. But Detroit got completely away from who they are, thanks to what Buffalo did defensively the first 2 possessions, and then Allen took care of it the rest of the way. It's incredible to me that they score almost 50 points against Detroit in Detroit, and Amari Cooper wasn't even targeted one time, not once. Guys like Ty Johnson had a big game. James Cook had a big game. And I agree with Spencer on this. He just underlined this for me. The interior of the Bills' defensive line has been their Achilles heel all year. They stepped up in this game. Now, Detroit, as I said after the Green Bay game, I told Pat that this defense, I think for the first time in that Packers game, we saw the attrition set in and the loss of Aiden Hutchinson really impact them. Well, now that is going to be a massive storyline because McNeil went out on the defensive line in this game too. There's now going to be and Carlton Davis at corner, their second best corner. So, it is turning into a real mash unit defensively for the Lions, and their schedule doesn't get any easier. I know the 49ers stink. They're going to play Minnesota the last week of the season. They're not completely out of the woods here defensively, and that puts all the onus on their offense to win these games. So the takeaway for me is what Buffalo's defense did early on. I know in a game where 90 points get scored, that doesn't make sense, but I thought that set the tone for them. And then Josh Allen did Josh Allen things. 6 straight game with 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. I don't think that's ever happened in NFL history. And he also threw for a season-high 362 yards in this game. Dan Campbell, I understand why he was desperate in the fourth quarter. But, dude, when it's a 10-point game with 12 minutes left and the success rate for onside kicks is 7%, you can't do it. Unless you have an onside kick. Formations can't get exotic because the rules are so limiting. Unless you're going to do something in terms of how the ball bounces or the way your kicker kicks it that we've literally never seen before, and you feel that you've executed it in practice every week, and it's basically a cheat code. When you do it, it's going to have the recovering team so off guard that it's almost like a freebie. You can get it whenever you need it or want it. You can't do it down 10 with 12 minutes left. I know your defense has sucked. There's less than a 10% chance of you getting it. Hollins returned the ball all the way to the 5-yard line. That was the game. And a lot of these stats here by the Lions, Laporte over 100 yards, Amon-Ra over 100 yards, Goff 5 touchdowns, just hollow numbers for me. This game was not even close to as interesting as the final score here suggests, 48-42, just a massive tip of the hat to the Bills. And I think right now they're going to end up with the number 1 seed in the AFC, and we'll get to why when we get to the Chiefs game a little bit later on. All right, the other team that made a huge statement today in a matchup of double-digit win teams, the battle for Pennsylvania, the state championship game between the Steelers and Eagles. I'm in Pittsburgh. I'm a Steelers fan. So this was the game that I had thought about all week. But, what's nice about life is that when you have no expectations or set the bar very low for yourself, you can't get disappointed. And that was my take on this with the Steelers. With no George Pickens, one of their defensive gems, Deshaun Elliott, was out for this game too. They also have not won a game in Philadelphia since 1965. They've lost 11 in a row to the Eagles. I didn't think it was going to happen today. I gave them almost no shot of winning. And they kind of made it interesting at the end of the first half. And then the Eagles just turned into the juggernaut team that they are in the second half, where they possessed the ball for 25 minutes, including a 10-minute drive to end the game where the Steelers never got the ball back. I think it was a 25-play drive or 22-play drive for the Eagles to end the game. Crisis averted is the question here. Yes, crisis was averted, because I said after the Panthers game, I tipped off Pat to this last Sunday on the podcast. I hope you were listening to it. I'm like, these A.J. Brown comments are going to become a big deal. And that's why I said, yes, they beat Carolina, but they're on there's a chance they teeter here again. They're teetering. This thing could blow up just like it did last year. They came out throwing the ball. Hurts got Brown involved right from the hop. They've been the worst first quarter offense in the entire NFL, believe it or not. They scored 10 points, opening drive field goal, got a touchdown right after that. Brown was a monster. He had 50 yards and a touchdown before you could blink in this game. He had final stats on him. I'll pull them up in a second. Devontae Smith had over 100 yards. I mean, Saquon Barkley kind of got dinged up in this game. He's not going to catch Eric Dickerson now. He only had 60-something yards. So, his MVP hopes went up in smoke here as Josh Allen was having this monster game. He's out of it now. He probably won't rush for 2,000 yards, but who cares, because the Eagles won the game by 2 touchdowns. They dominated the line of scrimmage. But the most important thing is you had the emotional intelligence of Nick Sirianni. I got to give him props, having won 10 in a row here, first time in Eagles history, of getting those two guys back together, symbiotic relationship between the quarterback and the star wide receiver. And it was the passing game of the Eagles that really beat Pittsburgh today. They didn't have Goddard, so it was really the A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts connection. And Hurts made comments after the game like, how did you like that? Is everything cool now? A.J. Brown said, Hurts said, so that's what y'all wanted to see, huh? And then A.J. Brown kind of said, threw it back and said the media blew it all out of proportion, whatever. We know that there was real friction there. And for them to put that aside and really dominate one of the better defenses in the NFL, that shows me that this team is more mature, more professional than they were last year, when personal beefs contributed to that awful tank job by the Eagles that ended with them losing in the wild card game to Tampa Bay. All right, let's get to the Chiefs and Browns here on First and Pod. We do every game every week. Patrick Mahomes leaves the Browns game in the fourth quarter. He gets diagnosed with a high ankle sprain. That's everywhere now. And the report is he's week to week. And we also know, and Mahomes, it was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy here. He bitched this week about how the schedule was unfair and it was something that this team was going to have to deal with. And then lo and behold, he gets hurt. They've got the Texans on Saturday, and then they've got to turn around a few days later and play the Steelers. So we're talking about now, how many days from now do they play? So Saturday they'll play. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. 2 games in 5 days. Saturday to Wednesday, and then the 6 days to get ready for it, or the 5 days to get ready for it. So there's really not time for Mahomes, I think, to come back and play. Well, there is if they want to push it, I guess is what I should say here. I got to collect my thoughts better. If the Chiefs are really prioritizing the number 1 overall seed, they'll just tape it up and act like they did a few years ago when he got hurt against Jacksonville in the AFC divisional round game. And then Mahomes went out and gutted it out in the AFC championship game. And it was a storyline going into the Super Bowl that year against Philly. But we know from the way last year went that home field advantage is not the end all be all for Kansas City. Health is. So if you're the Chiefs right now, I don't think it makes sense at all for him to play against the Texans. Houston scored only 20 points today against Miami. Their offense was held to 180 yards. If your defense shows up like it did, and that's not going to play like it did against Cleveland, where they got 6 takeaways today, and Jameis Winston reverted back to, holiday spirit, give the ball away, and got benched in this game for DTR late. That's not going to happen with Stroud. But we see Houston still has major offensive limitations because their line isn't very good. They couldn't run the ball against Miami today. They've won with defense and low scoring pretty much all year. So why can't Carson Wentz go in there and just manage the game and try to get them through both this game against Houston and then the Steelers? Hell, if the Steelers don't have George Pickens, it might be a first to 13-point type game. So I just don't think the risk reward is there to have Mahomes push it. I get it. You see how great Buffalo looks right now, and you'd prefer in the end to have them come to Arrowhead instead of having to go back there like you did earlier this year when you lost and in last year's playoffs. We've seen the Chiefs flip a switch. There won't be one if this guy isn't healthy. And look, Carson Wentz has been an MVP caliber quarterback before in Indianapolis. He had a 28 touchdown, 7 interception season. I know the guy's gotten harangued as basically being a piece of crap teammate and not a very good player the last few years. But if anybody can revive him and get him to play intelligently, I think it could be Andy Reid. So, yeah, I would not. It sucks for Netflix and it sucks for the NFL Saturday with the showcase game against Houston in the middle of the afternoon, up against the college football playoff, no less. But I would not play Patrick Mahomes against Houston. You've got to take that very seriously. No reason to do it. All right, Cowboys and Panthers. So this is less about the game and more about the news that came out before it and then what happened afterwards as a reaction to that. So Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones' son, who's the second in command there, ignited Micah Parsons' trade rumors by saying all these Cowboys people are ubiquitous. They're on radio shows. They are talking nonstop. He made a comment about how there's only so much money to go around and does it really make sense to have only a handful of players eating up basically your entire salary cap. And so those comments, this is a very good job by Cowboys media. After the Cowboys won this game today, they brought those comments to Parsons afterwards, and he made a point to say, look, I want to be a Cowboy for life. I want to resign here. I want to play with a star on my helmet for the rest of my career, which I think from that point of view, Parsons is savvy. He's got this huge media career that he's building, media empire that he's working on with this podcast. It does help when you are associated and affiliated with the biggest brand in professional sports, and that's the Dallas Cowboys, even though they don't win diddly squat. They haven't won jack shit since I was in 3rd grade, but they've got the biggest fan base in the entire sport. Anytime we talk Cowboys, podcasts talk Cowboys, they talk Cowboys on TV, there's always a reaction, even when the team is terrible. It's just the way it is. They're that kind of lightning rod team, and I think Parsons recognizes that. The Cowboys, in my opinion, have to re-sign him. You don't let a guy that's 25, 26 years old leave in free agency or trade him for a first-round pick or two. I mean, he's going into the last year of his contract, so I don't think a team would give you more than 2 first-round picks max, and I don't think Dallas is drafted poorly, but even with 2 bites at the apple, I don't think you're coming close to matching the production or value of a Micah Parsons in a trade like that. So what do? I think Parsons, a good contract comp is Nick Bosa, who got 5 years and $170 million in San Francisco. He's younger, so you got to give him more than that. This is going to be the first year he doesn't get the double-digit sacks, and it's only because he's been injured. So I would give him $180 million over 5 years. So that amounts to what, $35, $36 million a year? That's what he deserves. He deserves to be the highest paid defensive player in the entire NFL. But then the problem is you've got next year, Dak Prescott's cap hit is $90 million. CeeDee Lamb's cap hit is $35 million. So yeah, the signing bonus and stuff will get spread out. So you'll be able to minimize or lower the Parsons cap hit, but still let's ballpark it. You're talking about probably $150 million in 3 players with a salary cap that's $275 million. So that's more than half of your cap on 3 guys. So what do? My solution here, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be this offseason, but I think in the next year or two, you trade CeeDee Lamb. You're not gonna move your franchise quarterback, and you're not going to move your best defensive player who plays the most important defensive position, the pass rusher. That's the foundation of your team, quarterback and pass rusher. Now, I wouldn't have given Dak Prescott $60 million a year, but the Cowboys felt like they were between a rock and a hard place. They didn't want to go have to draft one or look around for one. Okay, that decision's already been made. He's got a no-trade clause. He's not getting dealt. Lamb, I think, is another story. You know what his price point is now if you're another team. The price of wide receivers are only going to go up. Well, Jamar Chase is going to reset the market. So the Lamb deal is not going to look as bad or as cost prohibitive even this offseason. So if you're trying, and Pat was all over this last episode when we talked before this game saying, my God, this team's got problems everywhere. This is not, he doesn't think this is a quick fix. He doesn't think this is a next year they just rebound and they get right back to winning 10, 11 games again. And I get it. Like, you don't have much in the way of playmakers, but if you can flip one for multiple picks, and that also frees up cap space to build a more balanced offense, that's what you do. You don't get rid of Micah Parsons. And Steve Jones said, we're not going to do that, but that still doesn't eliminate the issue, which is if they sign him, they're going to have too much money tied into 3 guys. I would make the odd man out, CeeDee Lamb. Bucks Chargers. Holy shit, was this wild. The Chargers led at the half, and then the Bucks scored 27 unanswered. Are the Chargers frauds? Yes, they are. And this is another thing I got wrong. I get things wrong, and then I come out and say I got things wrong. I'm not one of these people that ignores, and only says, look at how smart I was. Look at how many things I got right. No, I got the Bills pick over the Lions right. And on Thursday's preview pod, I said that if I had to pick one of these 2 teams to go on a playoff run, I would go with the Chargers over the Buccaneers. Wrong. The Bucs have beaten the Lions and Eagles this year. Think about that. The Lions and Eagles, they've beaten the 2 best teams in the NFC. And now they just stomped the mud hole in LA, and Baker Mayfield threw for 4 touchdowns. And Mike Evans is making big plays again. But most impressive, they held the Chargers to 17 points. The Chargers in 2 home games against playoff teams in the last month have given up 70 combined points to the Ravens and Buccaneers. They went into this stretch as the number 1 defense in the NFL. They're not anymore. Joey Bosa, I think, is shot. I think he's going to be a cap casualty, or he's going to have to take a big pay cut. Next year, they've got other pass rushers there. I think he's just a name at this point. Khalil Mack is still great. Derwin James, they've changed what he does, and he's still good. But Bosa, I think, he's going to be their version of what happened with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. I just don't see them. He's not worth the money anymore. The guy's got 4.5 sacks this year. He's not a big-time player. So I think the defense misses that type of guy, or what he used to be. They've also just either neutered Justin Herbert, or he's not as good as we think he is. And so right now I will take the more explosive opinion and say that Justin Herbert is overrated. He threw the ball 33 times today, and he was under 200 yards. He averaged 5.6 yards an attempt. He threw short of the sticks twice on 4th down, so they couldn't convert when they went for it. He got Ladd McConkey back. His offensive line is not that bad. I get it. They don't have the playmakers of some other teams. It would be nice to see Herbert with like 2 or 3 guys that could really, make massive plays. They don't have another all-star. J.K. Dobbins is out for the year there. But this is why they paid him so much money. If the line is good and he has time to throw, he should be able to make average players better. And the aggressiveness of him attacking downfield has just been completely taken out of this offense because they don't want him to turn the ball over. And the irony today is that he had one interception. The irony is that Baker Mayfield turned the ball over and they scored 40 points. So they need to unleash Justin Herbert. I think it's the last chance they have. This conservative approach, they can, I think, stumble and fall into the playoffs at this point. But if they're going to do any damage, they've got to just say, hey, man, we're going to live and die with what you do, which was the old way of doing things. They haven't scored more than 17. They've scored 17 points each week for the last 3 games. And they only beat Atlanta during that stretch because Kirk Cousins gave them an early holiday present where he just was throwing interceptions like crazy. So I think the Chargers are on big-time fraud alert. And now they've got a game on Thursday against the Broncos where if they lose it, they're going to end up as the 7th seed and having to play either Kansas City or Buffalo in the first round, which will have them one and done. Dolphins and Texans. Another bad game by Tua versus a winning team. Should Mike McDaniel be on the hot seat? Yes, and I feel like I'm the only person who's asking the hard questions here. Mike McDaniel should be on the hot seat. Remember 2 or 3 weeks ago when the prevailing sentiment was, here comes Miami, they can make the playoffs. Well, funny thing is, they started to play good teams. And when that happens for the Dolphins, they lose. This is a fact. Since Mike McDaniel took over as coach, he is 3-15 versus teams with a winning record. 3-15. Since the start of last year, the Dolphins are 1-10 against teams that are above 500. The Texans had under 200 yards of offense today. If a fairy or genie came to Mike McDaniel and gave him that before the game, hey, your defense is going to hold Stroud and Nico Collins and those guys under 200 yards, he would have been doing the worm in his hotel room. I mean, he would have been so excited because he would have thought that's an automatic win. Wrong. It's not, because this is what happens when the Dolphins go up against legitimate teams. 2 through 3 interceptions today. One of them was a horrible throw when they were driving for points right to Stingley. Another one would have been a pick six if the running back there did not make an incredible play to run the guy down. Almost went like 90 yards to the house. It was an incredible effort play. Miami is just a above average team that to its credit takes care of business against bad teams, but never beats the good ones. And that's just, I don't know how you can accept that. I understand that this organization, before McDaniel and Tua got there, they were seemingly bad every year. But I don't think you should just now have a feeling of acceptance where it's okay to be the 12th or 13th best team in the NFL every year. And that's who they've become. Vic Fangio didn't fit there. That shit tells you everything you need to know about the infrastructure of Mike McDaniel's coaching philosophy and everything else there. They literally had the best defensive coordinator other than Spagnuolo in the NFL, the number 2 defensive coordinator, who was completely given the Eagles defensive facelift and made them one of the best in the NFL. They had that guy. It didn't work. Now he's somewhere else striving. And the Dolphins, I don't just write this off to Tua had a horrible injury early in the year. You've got to be more competitive than 12 points at Houston today. Another team that has struggled to beat solid teams this year. All they've done is take advantage of the AFC South for the most part. But I did tell Pat that now is, well, we'll find out. If Carson Wentz plays for Kansas City, it's a whole different story. But the Texans have Kansas City and Baltimore coming up. And if they're able to win those games, they are going to look like a dark horse Super Bowl contender. Either way, their defense continues to play well. And did not see C.J. Stroud and the Texans offense being the thing that ultimately held that team back this year. Commanders and Saints. This was a crazy finish. I think Jets and Jaguars was the other game that went long. This was one of the last games in the 1:00 Eastern window to finish. And if you missed it, the Saints scored a touchdown as time expired and then went for 2 with Spencer Rattler coming in, the third-string quarterback, didn't get it, and they lost to the Commanders by 1 point. Both Dan Quinn and Darren Rizzi, the interim coach in New Orleans, had huge gripes with the officiating crew after this game. And Spencer says how pissed were the bettors because if you bet on Washington in this game, you didn't end up getting a cover because of that last-second touchdown. And I'm not exactly sure. The game went under either way. The total was very low, but they still went under the number. So that did not affect the over-under on this game, thankfully. But for those who missed it, I'm just going to quickly lay out what happened at the end of this game and why both coaches were nonplussed and just completely bothered by what happened. More so Dan Quinn because his team almost lost because of a horrible officiating error. There were 9 seconds left when New Orleans, they were close to the end zone, but they could still get a first down, and they completed a pass right near the goal line into the middle of the field. The problem was they didn't have any timeouts. So the clock is running, and then it stopped running for multiple seconds. It allowed New Orleans to then get to the line of scrimmage. The ball got spotted. They spiked it, and there was still time for one more play. If there had not been this clock malfunction, clock operating error by the officials, not like the people that work at the Superdome, but the officials, the game would have been over. And Washington would have won without this like sweated out 2-point conversion moment. Now, Sean Hockley, Ed's son, who was the main official in this game, said it was non-reviewable. There was nothing they could do about it. That to me is a load of BS. That's got to get changed. We have now the ability in games, and you hear it all the time on NFL broadcasts, where this replay assist kicks in. Okay, so there's this nebulous thing. It really, I think, in the minds of fans like me and viewers, like we don't know the parameters of it. We don't know when it is activated, when it isn't allowed to be used. And so in this situation, I don't understand how that isn't a quick fix where somebody, this eye in the sky that they have, this replay assist, someone that's constantly monitoring these things, how they don't buzz down to the official, get in his ear and say, hey, the game's over. Yeah, it stopped for a second. There was a hiccup with the clock, but we timed it out. This is how long it was frozen for. So let's add that up. And if it's greater than the amount of time that's left when the ball got spiked, the game should be over. And to hide behind things like it's not reviewable anymore, I don't think is good enough. We have the mechanism in place. We have the fail-safe in place to prevent things like this from happening. If this happened in a game that was more important with higher stakes, or if it happened in a playoff game, it would be one of the biggest stories in the NFL tomorrow. It won't be because it got kind of swept up in everything that was going on. Those big games were starting: Bills, Lions, Steelers, Eagles. But everyone's going to, say, hey, give Rizzi credit for having the balls to go for two. The real story here is that there was a massive officiating error. Both coaches were up in arms about everything that transpired late in this game with officiating. And it's just unacceptable that it's not better in 2024. We have already opened up Pandora's box and allowed for more things to get reviewed. Ravens and Giants next. Bigger story from this game: Lamar's 5 touchdown passes or the Giants' 9th straight loss. I'm going to get accused of my anti-Ravens bias again here. The bigger story is the Giants have lost 9 in a row, and they're 0-8 this season at MetLife Stadium. They did not go into the season with very high expectations. I understand that. Their over-under win total in Vegas was 7.5. 7.5 is a far cry, though, from 2-12, which is where this team is right now. This is the worst home season they've had since 1974. That was before the Meadowlands existed, and the Giants were playing their games at the Yale Bowl in Connecticut. Okay, it's 50 years since they've been this kind of laughingstock franchise. They're flying banners over the stadium every week now when the Giants are at home, urging John Mara to fire everybody and end this clown show that the Giants have turned into. I've seen Lamar Jackson, like he did week 1 against the Dolphins a few years ago, the year he won the MVP. I've seen him have a 5-touchdown game. I've seen him have a perfect passer rating game. I've seen him win 2 MVPs. He had a great game against the worst team in the NFL. That's not a story to me. Lamar Jackson destroying. Now, they have lost a bad team. So I guess in that respect, I do have to give him credit for taking care of business. So I'll do that. But the bigger story to me is the way this Giants season has completely disintegrated. Daniel Jones having to get cut. There's no, like we've seen, like remember last year when a lot of teams lost starting quarterbacks and these really good offensive coaches were able to get backup quarterbacks to play well? Jake Browning in Cincinnati with the Bengals, Joe Flacco in Cleveland with the Browns, Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins in Minnesota had big games. It was really one of the stories of the 2023 season. Brian Dable was coach of the year a couple of years ago. Drew Lock is there. Tommy DeVito was passable last year. Even Daniel Jones. I mean, they've not been able to get a big game or a good game out of any of those guys. And, I get it. When their big Andrew Thomas, when their left tackle went out on that offensive line, everything kind of went downhill from there. One player, and I know it's at the blindside spot, should not be that important where their offense now is totally inept and every game is a blowout. Last week it wasn't against the Saints, but they didn't score in that game until there was 3 minutes left. So the bigger story for me is that they've got a clean house. And the bottom line is, do not make the same mistake the Bears did. The Bears' plan was, let's keep Matt Eberflus, let's bring in a new offensive coordinator, and let's draft Caleb Williams and have the old coaching staff nurture the number 1 overall pick quarterback. No, you got to have a clean start here. I think that whether it's Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, the opportunity to coach that guy in New York is going to be very appealing to the best offensive minds who are available in the NFL. And that's what I would want to do. I mentioned to Pat, why not bring Mike McCarthy to the Jets and have Mike McCarthy work with Aaron Rodgers like they have in the past? Well, I don't think Mike McCarthy's a terrible idea for the Giants. I would not mind a Mike McCarthy marriage with Cam Ward or Sanders. I know Mike McCarthy might not have the outgoing personality that Deion. That shouldn't matter to Deion. Deion should care about what can a guy do for my kid. And McCarthy really has won everywhere he's been. I mean, he's had lean years with both the Packers and Cowboys, but overall his body of work is phenomenal. Yeah, the guy has had some horrible playoff losses, but it would be amazing if the Giants got back to that point. They could do a lot worse, in my opinion. I know it's a retread, but at the same time, what they've been doing in New York the last 5 or 6 times where they've been hiring these guys that are assistants hasn't worked. The one time it did work was when they brought Tom Coughlin in after he had success in Jacksonville. They won 2 Super Bowls. So I would bring in a coach that was successful somewhere else. Colts, Broncos. Broncos win game with huge playoff ramifications. Are they for real? They're not for real as far as being a player in this year's playoffs, because I just look at the way this game went today against Indy. And if you saw it, another one of these brain dead plays, Jonathan Taylor of all people, a veteran running back who's led the league in rushing, dropped the ball as he was running into the end zone. And it was a touchback. We saw it earlier this year with Malachi Corley. We saw a Bengals player get loosey-goosey with the ball and fumble it at the goal line too. It happened twice today. It should happen 0 times. And that was the turning point in the game. And really, Denver did nothing offensively. Knicks threw for only 130 yards. He was their leading rusher with only 23 yards. Cortland Sutton was their leading receiver with 32 yards. They had a pick 6 kind of lateral trick play by the Colts. They screwed up that they took back Nick Bonito for a touchdown. Long punt return that set them up with a short field. That's how they end up winning the game 31-13. But their offense was not any good. And they were trailing in the fourth quarter when this onslaught happened. It was, it all happened late in the game. Not to take anything away from them. It's still impressive that a team with a rookie quarterback, the last rookie quarterback taken in the first round is now a lock to make the playoffs because Indianapolis was the one team that could catch them, and now the Broncos have the tiebreaker. But I can't see them winning in Buffalo or Kansas City or Pittsburgh. And those are the three places where they would have to go in the first round of the playoffs. I mean, the Pittsburgh thing would be insane because it would be Sean Payton versus Russell Wilson. That would be ratings bonanza if that happened. And say what you will about Russ, but he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, an 8-time Pro Bowler who's headed to Canton someday with a Super Bowl ring and another Super Bowl appearance. I don't see him getting punked by the team that is paying him $38 million to play for the Steelers in Pittsburgh in January after the Steelers beat them in week 2 in Denver. And I think they would play a competitive game against Kansas City because they know them so well. But I would just expect Mahomes to make just enough plays to win the game. And then I think they would just get destroyed by the Bills. So in that respect, they're not for real. But I would say they're for real as a long-term entity here. I would expect Bo Nix to get better next year. I think Sean Payton is an outstanding offensive coach. I think he's done a great job of hiring the right people on the defensive side of the ball. And Vance Joseph and that team, they have maximized the return, and they've gotten more out of that group than, say, where they were drafted or the money spent on those players. I honestly think it's one of the most underrated coaching jobs in the NFL this year, what they've done defensively. Remember, they gave up 70 points last year in a game to Miami. It really isn't. It's discussed on podcasts like this because we do every game and every team, but the Broncos defense really is one of the great stories in the NFL. But, they won this game. Knicks threw 3 interceptions today. They won this game more because of the mistakes the Colts made than anything they did. And that's just not going to be a winning formula in the playoffs, but you do have to give a young team like this credit for even getting to the playoffs when their win total coming into the year was only 5.5. Bengals Titans. Joe Burrow set the Bengals touchdown record today. Should he win Offensive Player of the Year? No, he shouldn't, Andrew. And that's actually a stupid question that I made it, so I'm calling myself out. He can't win Offensive Player of the Year because Josh Allen is going to win MVP. And then you've got to decide between Saquon Barkley and Lamar Jackson for the Offensive Player of the Year. Lamar Jackson should get some hardware for the season he's having. If he doesn't, then he's going to be second-team All-Pro at quarterback behind Josh Allen, first-team All-Pro, so we'll get that recognition. And the only recognition Burrow is going to get is the fact that he will be the runaway winner, I think, for Comeback Player of the Year, returning from that hand injury that he had last year. The reason why I even put this question out there is because other than winning Comeback Player of the Year, there should be more recognition. Joe Burrow should get something greater than that for the kind of season he's having. He's on pace for 44 touchdown passes. We've seen Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers win MVP awards with those kind of numbers. He was 29 yards shy of catching or setting the record for most games, consecutive games, with 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. He got the 3 touchdowns. He only had 271 passing. I'm shocked Cincinnati didn't do something late in the game to try to force it. Maybe this whole deal with this Mark Gastineau documentary that's out, and him confronting Brett Favre over that fraudulent sack against the Giants and Packers, maybe that kept them from doing something, some chicanery or tomfoolery late in the game to get it. I don't know. Either way, it's just really close to 300 yards, and I'm surprised he didn't get there to keep it going. But I just did not believe in 2024, given how the NFL now is such a quarterback-driven game. I don't mean by like television ratings or the Q score of teams, Q rating. I just mean when you have a great quarterback who's productive, you win, right? I mean, this is not the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, where a lot of the times maybe you had a team that had an offensive system where the quarterback put up numbers, but the NFL was such a run-dominant league That was not there was not as much correlation between being an elite quarterback or having an elite passing game and winning like there is today. Just about every year, go look up leaders in touchdown passes, and that quarterback's team is winning a lot of games and going to the playoffs. This team's going to fall way short of that. Denver won today. The best the Bengals can do is 9-8. They still played Denver, but they would need Denver to lose out and they'd have to win out. That's not going to happen. So it's just remarkable to me that Burrow's going to come close to 5,000 yards. He might even get to 5,000. He's going to throw more than 40 touchdown passes, and he's going to be on the outside looking in. It's a testament to just how lousy that Bengals defense has been, and it's absurd to me that they haven't done anything to try to fix it. No defensive coordinator change. If anything, they're probably going to lose guys. Trey Hendrickson isn't going to be back there, and he's he is the league leader in sacks. So, they're going to get even worse, at least on paper. It's just mind-boggling that you can have Joe Burrow playing as well as Josh Allen, as well as Lamar Jackson, and they're going to have nothing to show for it. They're not even going to have a good draft pick. They're going to be just mediocre enough where they don't even get good draft compensation out of this lost season. Patriots, Cardinals, Jets, Jaguars. Anything on these games? Yeah, as a matter of fact, a couple quick thoughts. I thought Aaron Rodgers played well today, and it was against one of the league's worst teams. And Doug Peterson should be fired. And I don't understand how if I'm a Jaguars fan or if I'm living in Jacksonville and doing radio there, I'm on the air saying, because Tom Coughlin works for the Jags and probably doesn't get along with Bill Belichick, those two don't really see eye to eye on things. Coughlin beat him in the Super Bowl twice. There's just, I think, a lot of professional jealousy there between the two guys. Dislike for each other. Shad Khan, his son Tony Khan, not seen necessarily as like individuals that want to give power to Bill Belichick, especially after the way the Urban Meyer thing blew up in their face. How do you proceed forward with Doug Peterson? Doug Peterson is one of the great, twice now, it's looked like this guy was a great coach. He wins a Super Bowl, the Philly special. He's immortalized in Philly. 2 years later, he's fired. He gets Trevor Lawrence immediately to look like a number one pick. They immediately have success. They win a playoff game. They almost win in Kansas City. From the second half of last year to now, he's been the worst coach in the NFL, and that includes guys like Matt Eberflus and I'm forgetting the Jets head coach's name, Robert Saleh, who was fired. I mean, he's done worse than those guys, and he's still employed. And twice now, it's a trend where it looks like he's got the foundation or he's got his team in position to do great things for a long time. And it's been a self-destruction there, implosion. And then on the Cardinals and Patriots, there was a clip that went viral of Robert Kraft and his son, Jonathan Kraft, in their booth. Just, you can tell, flipping out over play calling decisions by the Patriots coaching staff. Jonathan Mayo. What am I talking about? He's a baseball insider. Jonathan Mayo getting a pop. Gerard Mayo, just really his inability to, I think, defend some of his questionable decisions after games in a sports media market like Boston, I think has the media there turned off and the fans there, I think, are in lockstep. So the only thing that I believe is going to keep him from being one and done as a coach is the stubbornness of the owner. Because if he does that, then he's admitting that he's failing in the post-Belichick split. Belichick, I think, for the first, his goal was to do better than Tom Brady. I think now there's a little bit of a battle between Kraft and Belichick, with Belichick getting a new job. And so this was the guy that they agreed on to replace Belichick there, Mayo. And I don't think the owner wants to, a year later, say, I was wrong again. We need to start over. So I think he probably will get another year there. The biggest thing that matters is Drake May's development. And I did feel like he took a step backwards in this game today. All right. Thanks to everybody who listened all the way through here. First in Pod. Pat will be back on Thursday. Really easy, guys. Subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening, do it. And that way, whenever you're free, whenever you get a minute and you want to just get a full breakdown of what happened in the NFL, you could pop us on and it'll be right there waiting for you in your feed. That would mean the world to us this holiday season. Get on board. We'll talk Thursday night after Broncos and Chargers. I'm Andrew Fillipponi. Thanks to Spencer Ray. It's First in Pod.